Hi, Second Calvary. Brother Tim here with another episode of Civic Corner. Today's episode is entitled Executive Orders. By what authority? We will continue our focus on the judicial branch's increasing role in checking the exercise of executive power by the executive branch. But before we dive deep into the judicial branch's role in balancing the exercise of executive power from the executive branch, we must first understand exactly what an executive order is. And so within the last 2 months, the news has been filled with the latest executive order being signed and then subsequently challenged in federal court. There are groups that closely watch the actions of the executive to ensure what is taking place will not negatively affect their interests and or their constituency or the people who they are charged to represent. These groups literally stand guard and at the ready for any perceived misuse or violation of the law and the Constitution by any branch of government, but most importantly by the executive branch. So what is an executive order exactly? I'm glad you asked. An executive order is simply a rule, regulation, or instruction from a president that does not require the approval of the legislative branch, so that's Congress, which has the force of law over federal agencies. So remember back in civics class that the power to make laws rests with the legislative branch. But here over time, executive orders have grown out of the executive branch's constitutionally mandated role to enforce the law. So you may be asking, but what authority does this man have to be making all these executive orders and changes to the government? The simple answer is the Constitution. So I know. Your next question is, I know it didn't say this or that in the Constitution. The document isn't that long. And you would be right to think or say that. But before we delve deep into a few federal court cases challenging the flurry of executive orders from the current administration, which will be in our next episode, we must deal with where the power to make executive orders comes from. And so I will be shooting out some terms. These would be like terms to remember, terms you might hear when you're watching the news and all that kind of stuff, and you hear the explanation of cases or the executive orders being explained. Some of these concepts will come into play. But the U.S. Supreme Court, through decades of interpretation and literal reading of the United States Constitution, has recognized 4 types of powers derived from that document. So the first one is called enumerated powers, which are powers specifically identified in the U.S. Constitution, meaning they're written, you see them, you read them, it means what it says. The next one is implied powers. So these are powers necessary to carry out the enumerated powers. So there might be powers to say that you could do whatever you need to do to get the enumerated powers through. The next one is resulting powers, or powers resulting from the whole set of powers or a specific situation or circumstance. And then the last is our inherent powers not enumerated or implied, but they're necessary for the functioning of government. So according to Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, which definitely details all the executive branch, the executive branch is tasked with certain roles and responsibilities, but the list is quite short. So that should bring you back to, again, what is the authority that the president has with the executive orders that he's pushing out there. So a quick reading of Article 2 will reveal nothing about executive orders. So since executive orders are not enumerated, meaning specified or listed in the U.S. Constitution, they are actually a mix of the other 3 types of powers: implied, resulting, and inherent. And executive orders being a mix of 3 types of interpretation of power is where the gray area arises, where presidents of all parties push the envelope in exercising their power and where all the court challenges come from. So we trust, and the design of our 3 branches of government calls for the judicial branch to help sort out when, where, and how the executive branch may have violated the law and or crossed the unconstitutional zone. And this is where the fun begins. Reading and interpreting court cases and opinions. Come on, guys. I'm a bit of a nerd in this area, so it may not be fun for you, but it's a necessary part of civics. and being an informed citizen. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to come at it as a constitutional scholar. But the way the cases are written, and by knowing some foundation about how to interpret this, you'll be able to pick up on the gist of what's going on. And as we said in past episodes, the judicial branch seems to be will be the place where a lot of these things get settled, and where we learn more again about what's really going on with executive orders, or other kind of laws that will possibly come up from this U.S. Congress, et cetera, et cetera. So in our next episode, we will look at a couple of well-known executive orders from the current administration and the subsequent court cases to show you how civics and the balance of power work in real time. So as always, if you have any questions and or concerns, ask someone you trust who may have the answers, or who knows a trusted place to get the correct answer. These are trying times, but we are resilient people who have been through worse than this. But we must stay involved, and part of being involved is keeping your ear out and watching what's going on in your country, in our country. And this is Brother Tim with your Civic Corner. Peace.